Are you on a budget and looking for a new banger mouse? Do you wish your Starlight Medium had some junk in the trunk? Do you want to try out higher polling rate and have had issues with 4K before? If so, you need to watch this video because this mouse is fucking fire.
Is this the chum bucket?
No, bitch, this is Padsmith. Pay fucking superstar, riding in a supercar. Shooting at that boy like Cupid Dipper with my Ruger, bro. You want the crab bank, didn't trap me in my cash app. I just hit up Sandy
Holy
like
shit,
your
that shot
bitch
was
wants your Snapchat. Happy meals anytime I end up there on Jupiter. Chasing
Holy,
out
that's
with no babe on my dick, gave no stupid.
First of all, I wanted to mention that this mouse was sent out to me by Darmoshark. Huge shout out to Levi for providing me with this unit. And as always, all my opinions are my own, as they are with all of my videos and recommendations, as always. I also quickly wanted to mention that over 88% of you guys watching still aren't subscribed, so make sure to hit that sub button so you don't miss out on bangers like this one. Starting with the boring stuff, inside the box you get some grips, smaller style mouse gates, the standard 1K receiver, the 2K polling rate receiver that is also already paired to the mouse itself, and a USB-A to USB-C cable with a dongle to plug in your 1K receiver into. Since my Darmoshark M3 had some pretty bad QC issues, especially with the sidewall flexing, I wanted to mention that this first batch Empress is as solid as it gets and that my copy is fucking flawless. What makes this Chinese banger so special is the rather unique shape. At the front of this mouse, it does give off some strong Final Mouse medium vibes, but the back, however, is a completely different story. When actually using the mouse in-game, the placement, height and overall feel of the hump in the back when clawing the mouse reminds me a lot of the X2 Mini. However, the butt in the back is much wider on the M3s, and it also generally just fills out your palm a lot more. And together with the rest of the shape, this thing reminds me a lot of the Rocket Burst, but with the M3s definitely feeling quite a bit more narrow. Compared to the Darmoshark M3, the M3s basically feels like a mini version of it, but with a completely redesigned rear end. Whilst the M3 is insanely big and also very flat, the M3s is overall much smaller in every dimension, but with this really claw-focused hump in the back. Other than those comparisons, I don't personally have anything else to compare it to currently, and I think the info I've given you so far should be enough for a good idea of what it genuinely feels like. Just remember that the hump is pretty big and it can feel a bit restricting due to its wide butt in the back, but it's definitely nowhere near as restrictive as something like the Lamsu Atlantis, for example. And don't be surprised if it actually fills your palm if you've got smaller hands than my 19 by 10 centimeter ones. And I also wanted to mention that the side curvature is pretty forgiving, and it generally feels very safe, and it's definitely one of my favorite parts about the shape personally. The coating on this mouse really isn't anything special, but I haven't had any issues personally. As soon as your hand is a bit warm, the mouse feels really nice to use, and I have not at one point felt a need for applying those grips that they provide. For the main buttons, this mouse uses the TTC Gold 60M switches, and they're some of the most clicky and tactile ones that I've ever felt, without them being too heavy in my personal opinion. I honestly think that they're a perfect choice and I'm really happy with their implementation. The scroll wheel feels pretty cheap, it's pretty light and virtually silent, and it overall gives me office mouse vibes. Talking about M3, it's not the lightest to activate, but I've had no issues using it in-game. The side buttons do have a bit of pre-travel, but I found them to be very responsive in-game, and also not too heavy. Most of the time I spent with the Varun was actually with the stock skates that were on it before I put on these dots. And despite them being the default solid white Teflon skates, I didn't find them to be that horrible on firmer pads. Of course the glide was rather controlled, but I really didn't find them that horrible. If you're looking for some really speedy skates, however, make sure to check out my dot skates roundup video. While solely using the mouse on 2K polling rates, the battery lasted for about 4 to 5 whole days for me personally. I expected it to be much worse. But just like with the VGN Dragonfly F1 Pro, I was surprised how long this thing could last, especially if you were to use the normal 1K polling rate instead. When it comes to the 2K capability, not only was I surprised that it actually worked for me, since I had many issues on my AMD system before with 4K polling rate, but I was also surprised that I actually noticed a difference from the default 1K polling rate. Since Overwatch is one of those games that works incredibly well with higher polling rate, I didn't have any issues at all and the input felt really smooth, especially when tracking. I won't go into any technical details or graphs or anything like that, so if you want more info from that category, you'll have to wait for House to make a video on the Varun. One issue that I wanted to point out, however, is with the 2K receiver itself. On my copy, I can't use the 2K dongle without having it plugged into a USB 2.0 port. I contacted Darmoshark about this issue and they simply told me that I won't be able to fix it unless I swap my hardware. However, Darmoshark confirmed that this is now fixed for all future batches, but I assume that I'm not the only one having this issue with this first batch. And since it seems to not have affected the performance for me personally, even when testing the polling rate on the mouse tester software, I'm not going to let that issue refrain me from recommending the M3s. Now, to everyone's favorite topic, software. Since the latest version, they have updated it for this new release to support high polling rate as well. By default, the mouse is actually set to 500 Hz. I'd highly recommend you to plug in that 2K receiver and set it to 2000 Hz instantly. Some other rather questionable default settings are ripple being turned on, esports mode being turned off, and the debounce time being set to 8 milliseconds. I would personally recommend turning ripple off, turning on the esports mode, and setting the debounce time to 2 milliseconds instead, since that's the settings I've been using for over a week now without any double clicking issues. Another thing that's really fucking based about the M3s are the colorways that this thing comes in now. This mouse comes in white, black, red, yellow, pink, gray. But the absolute most base color this thing comes in is fucking purple. Like, that's just way too sick. And also, all these colors come in at the same price, that is 56 euros, which is $60 in the Bald Eagle currency. When it comes to my personal opinion about this mouse, even though I probably won't main it due to the hump that is a bit too prominent for my likings, I really do think that this is the best budget gaming mouse out there currently. From now on, this will be the mouse that I recommend to anybody who's looking for a new finger banger and doesn't want to splurge $150 on a G-Wolf's HDS Plus 4K. Now, to the conclusion, should you buy this mouse? If you're a claw gripper with medium to large size hands, or if you've always wished your Starlight Medium had a claw grip focused hump, for 50 to 60 USD depending on where you get it from, this thing is a fucking no-brainer. I personally wouldn't recommend it for any hand sizes that are noticeably smaller than my 19x10 ones, since the hump will most likely either fill out your palm and force you into a palm grip, or simply restrict your movements to a degree. But I mean, hey, if you're a palm gripper, this might just be the perfect budget mouse for you out there. I can definitely see fingertip players enjoying this mouse a lot, especially since it's not nearly as wide as the M3, and the sides are very forgiving and pretty flat. So it's very suitable for all kinds of grips, and way more forgiving than something like the NPO1S for example, which basically forces your thumb to go in a specific spot. But yeah, with the awesome QC, it's great shape, 2K functionality, based fucking colorways, and everything else, at anywhere between $50 and $60, this thing is almost a must-have in my opinion. Anyway, that's about it for this video. As always, I'll make sure to put some links at the top of the description for you guys to go ahead and buy this nugget. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to hit that sub button. Peace out.
And they got everything covered here. They got the post office of Bussy, Bussy Insurance, and the State Bank of Bussy, and the Bussy Library.